Narcissists. Most people think narcissists are born manipulative. They are not. Narcissistic collapse does not begin with rage. It begins with fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing admiration. Fear of becoming emotionally invisible. And once the collapse begins, every stage becomes harder to stop. Explanation 1. Control. In the beginning, everything still appears stable. The narcissist still has the image, the attention, the validation. The illusion of superiority remains intact. Most people never notice stage 1 because externally, nothing seems wrong. But beneath the surface, something has already started to fracture. Narcissists depend on external validation the same way the body depends on oxygen. Attention regulates identity. Admiration regulates emotional stability. And the moment that validation becomes unstable, the collapse quietly begins. At this stage, control becomes everything. Conversations become strategic. Relationships become systems of emotional supply. Every interaction is measured. Every response is monitored. Every threat to the ego is recorded. Because the narcissist is not protecting confidence. They are protecting construction. A psychological structure built entirely around avoiding shame. And the deeper the insecurity, the stronger the performance becomes. Stage 2. Fragmentation. This is where the mask starts becoming harder to maintain. The emotional reactions become inconsistent. Manipulation becomes more visible. Anger appears faster. Patience disappears sooner. The narcissist begins sensing instability everywhere. Small criticism suddenly feels unbearable. Distance feels threatening. Silence feels personal. Because fragmentation changes perception itself. The narcissist no longer experiences relationships normally. They experience relationships as mirrors. Reflection becomes survival. Validation becomes dependency. And dependency creates fear. At this stage, the narcissist begins splitting people into categories: useful, dangerous, loyal, replaceable. The emotional world becomes binary. Idealization and devaluation start cycling faster. People who were once admired suddenly become enemies, not because they changed, but because they stopped reinforcing the identity the narcissist needed to see. Fragmentation is dangerous because this is the stage where emotional instability starts leaking into reality. Careers suffer. Relationships weaken. Isolation slowly begins. But the narcissist still believes control can be restored. They still believe the system can survive. Stage 3. Paranoia. By stage 3, survival mode takes over. The narcissist begins detecting betrayal everywhere. Criticism becomes attack. Boundaries become disrespect. Independence becomes abandonment. The world starts feeling hostile. And paranoia changes behavior completely. Control becomes obsession. Attention becomes addiction. Emotional reactions become explosive. Rage appears unpredictably. Empathy weakens. Reflection disappears. At this stage, the narcissist is no longer protecting self-esteem. They are protecting psychological survival. Because beneath the grandiosity, there is something far more fragile than most people realize: dependency. Narcissists often appear emotionally independent, but psychologically, many become completely dependent on external reinforcement. Without admiration, the identity destabilizes. Without validation, the internal structure weakens. And once paranoia fully develops, relationships become battlefields. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every emotional distance feels intentional. The narcissist begins fighting enemies that often do not exist. And this is where collapse starts accelerating. Stage 4. Collapse. This is the stage most people misunderstand. Because externally, the narcissist may still appear powerful. They may still appear confident, functional, dominant. But internally, the structure is failing. Emotional regulation begins collapsing. Social masks become harder to maintain. Relationships deteriorate faster. Rage becomes more visible. Desperation becomes easier to detect. At this stage, the narcissist often attempts extreme control strategies. Manipulation intensifies. Emotional outbursts escalate. Attention-seeking behaviors increase dramatically, because the identity can no longer sustain itself naturally. And the most disturbing part is that many narcissists begin recognizing the collapse themselves. They sense the instability. They sense the loss of control. They sense people emotionally disconnecting from them. But instead of creating reflection, collapse often creates escalation, more control, more rage, more emotional damage. Because once the false self begins breaking apart, panic takes over. And panic changes human behavior faster than almost anything else. Stage 5, void. In the final stage, the narcissist is no longer fighting for admiration. They are fighting against emptiness. Because beneath every layer of superiority, every manipulation, every performance, every attempt to dominate, there was always the same fear: worthlessness. The collapse eventually reveals something most people never notice. Narcissistic identity is often constructed externally, built through validation, reinforced through attention, stabilized through control. But reality cannot permanently sustain artificial identity structures. Eventually, the performance exhausts itself, the relationships collapse, the admiration weakens, the emotional supply disappears. And when that happens, the narcissist is forced to confront the one thing the false self was built to avoid: the self underneath it. The terrifying part about narcissistic collapse is not the destruction of ego. It is the destruction of the system that protected the ego from reality. Human behavior follows patterns. Emotional systems evolve in stages. And most psychological collapse begins long before anyone notices it. ArchiveNeural. Observe. Analyze. Understand.